Alright, so Battlefield 6. It's a good game. I've been enjoying it a lot. I just have one question for the developers, for DICE. Why did you make the pistols so ass? These are the worst pistols I've ever used in any first-person shooter ever. And in this video, we're going to talk about why that is. So yeah, we're going to talk about why the pistols are bad, how I would fix them, and then maybe at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the philosophy of game design, if you will. So like always, if you want to solve a problem, you first have to identify the problem and understand why it's a problem in the first place. So why are the pistols so bad in Battlefield 6? Well, it's because the game uses a caliber-based damage model, which, for the record, I'm not saying the caliber-based damage model is the problem. I think it's fine. I think it's kind of cool that all of the 5.56 guns do the same damage and all the 9mm guns do the same damage, but there need to be exceptions. And DICE themselves seem to understand this, but we'll get to that later. So the problem with the pistols is that, you know, the 9mm pistols do the same amount of damage per shot as the 9mm SMGs, but in a lot of cases they're shooting at half or less than half of the fire rate, meaning that the time to kill with the pistols is sometimes twice as long as the primaries. Now, generally as a player, I don't like to get bogged down in the numbers and in the stats, you know, I'm more of a style kind of guy. If something seems cool, I'll use it, but at a certain point, something becomes so bad that no matter how much style it has, you can no longer use it. And that's the pistols in this game, so I had to dive into the numbers just to see what we were looking at. Now, for the record, I'm talking about the semi-auto magazine-fed pistols. The revolvers are actually kind of fine. We'll touch on those a bit later. For right now, we're talking about the P18, the 5.7, the M45A1, and the GGH-22, or whatever the fuck it's called. If we look at the average time to kill of the primary weapons in the games, when you look at the ARs, the average time to kill is 239 milliseconds. When you look at the SMGs, the average time to kill is 237. LMGs, 245. Carbines, 222. They're all right around the same spot. And the game feels that way, right? I feel like I can do perfectly fine with any of the primaries. But the second I switch to a pistol, even if I'm trying to kill someone that I've already damaged with my primary, it just becomes hopeless. It's gotten to the point where oftentimes if I have to reload my primary, I'd rather just sit in the fight and take my chances at reloading the gun for like 3 seconds rather than switching to my pistol, which I know is faster, but just feels intrinsically like I have less of a chance because that's just how goddamn bad these pistols are. And the statistics back that up. The best semi-auto pistol in terms of time to kill is the M45A1 with 367 millisecond time to kill up close. 367 milliseconds is like 50% longer than the average time to kill of the primaries. The worst pistol, the 5.7, with 533 milliseconds time to kill, it literally takes twice as long to kill someone with that pistol as with the primaries. What the hell were they thinking? You can literally be killed more than twice. I mean, not like a full 3 times, but like 2 times and some change if you're trying to kill someone with the 5.7 if they're using pretty much any primary. With some of those primaries being absolutely ridiculous in time to kill, like the SCW-10 or like the AK-4D, for instance. Those guns, any gun that has like a 3-shot kill up close is gonna be insane. It's made even worse when you realize that time to kill for these pistols, that fastest theoretical time to kill of 533 milliseconds or 367 milliseconds is only within 10 meters. You literally cannot achieve that time to kill on the closest dummy in the firing range because it's just barely outside that 10-meter range. Even though it says it's at 10 meters, you just physically can't get that close, even if you hop up on the bench. So the problem with the pistols in the game is clearly that they just statistically kill too slowly. It's just too slow. The game has too fast of a time to kill compared to the pistols. And again, let me be clear, I'm not complaining about the time to kill. I think the time to kill of the primaries in this game is perfect. It's literally perfect, but the pistols are so bad. Again, the root cause of this is technically the fact that Battlefield 6 uses a caliber-based damage model, so all weapons of the same caliber do the same damage, except for the fact that the game already has some exceptions to that. The M39 EMR and the AK-4D both fire the 7.62 by 51mm NATO cartridge, but the EMR does 40 damage and has a 1.5x headshot multiplier by default, whereas the AK-4D only does 33 damage and has a 1.34 times multiplier by default. The developers understand that when it comes to low capacity semi-auto weapons like the DMRs, you can't balance them in the same way. They need to do more damage per shot. They need to have a higher headshot multiplier by default to make them competitive, to make them good. So why they didn't do this to the pistols also just doesn't make any sense to me, because pistols and DMRs are basically the same in terms of how they operate. They're low capacity semi-auto weapons. It's just that pistols as like a weapon idea is going to be less effective. We're gonna get into like how the game should be balanced later on, but for right now, that's the problem. So how do we fix it? The fix is pretty obvious, although I have some other niche ideas. You just increase the damage. The way I'm imagining it is you increase the damage for the pistols by like 1 damage tier. The damage in the game goes 16, 20, 25, 33, 40, 50, because those are the, you know, intervals of shots to kill, because that's all that really matters, is how many shots it takes to kill. You divide 100 by some number, and that's the number you get. So 16 is a 6-shot kill, 20 is a 5-shot kill, yada yada yada. Currently, the 5.7 is the lowest damaging pistol at 20 damage. It becomes 25 damage. The P18 and GGH are 25 damage. They become 33.34 damage. It's listed in the menu as 33 damage, but I'm sure if you spent any amount of time watching Battlefield videos on YouTube, you probably understand at this point that Battlefield 6 has decimal damage values. So when it says 33, it's a 3-shot kill, even though 33 times 3 is 99. It's 33.34 damage. Then the M45A1, which currently does 33.34 damage, would become a 40 damage per shotgun. We're gonna start getting into each pistol individually. We're gonna start with the P18 because it's the standard pistol, and it's also the one that requires the least changes. So like I said, it currently does 25 damage. It now does 33.34 damage per shot. Same fire rate, giving it a new time to kill of 300 milliseconds, down from its original 450 milliseconds. Significantly better time to kill, although it is still quite a bit slower than the primaries, but just makes it that much more competitive. At 33.34 damage, it's a 2 headshot kill with hollow point rounds, meaning that the fastest theoretical time to kill with the P18 up close would be 150 milliseconds, which is pretty fast. I mean, that's faster than any of the primaries, but again, it's a semi-auto weapon, meaning you have to pull the trigger each time, which makes it slightly less convenient to use. It has a lower magazine capacity than most of the primaries, and that would require 2 headshots at close range, which not everyone is going to be able to pull off super consistently, so I think that's totally fine. And obviously, you should be rewarded for getting headshots, so yeah, there you go. Then we have the 5.7. It currently does 20 damage and has a 533 millisecond time to kill. It's like the slowest killing gun in the whole game. It's terrible. So we're going to up the damage 1 tier, so it goes from 20 damage per shot to 25 damage per shot. I'm also going to up the fire rate from 450 to 500, which gives it a time to kill of 360 milliseconds, which is quite a bit slower than the P18, which it already was. It is still going to be basically the worst pistol in the category. But to offset that, I think something interesting that they could do with the 5.7 would be to make it kind of like the M277 of the pistol category, where it basically has no damage drop off. It becomes the most consistent pistol because it performs basically the same at all ranges, which means that up close, it doesn't really do all that well, but as you start to stretch out the ranges, it starts to become a little bit more competitive. That's also aided by the fact that by default, the 5.7 has the fastest muzzle velocity of all of the pistols, so it pushes it kind of into more of like a long range pistol role, if that's even a role that exists at all. Again, it's still not really all that competitive up close, which is where you're going to be using your pistol most of the time anyway, but I could see it potentially having some sort of use case if it had minimal damage drop off, you know. Currently, I feel like there's pretty much no reason to use it unless you just want to stunt on people, but it's a very annoying weapon to use. Then we'll talk about the GGH, the Glock. Currently, the Glock does 25 damage per shot like the P18. That would also get increased to 33.34, but because it shoots slower, it would still have a slightly slower time to kill at 333 milliseconds. So to give the Glock an edge over the P18, we're going to increase the headshot multiplier to 1.5x by default. That way, you don't have to spend those points on hollow point rounds, making the Glock more versatile in how you can accessorize it, giving the player a trade-off between having a gun with a slightly faster time to kill, but potentially less customization, and vice versa. If you have good aim, then potentially it's worthwhile to you to use the Glock over over the P18. It becomes more of a higher skill weapon potentially because it allows you to kit out the weapon more without having to divert those attachment points to the hollow point round specifically to make use of your skill. Then we get to the M45A1, which goes from a 33.34 damage per shotgun to a 40 damage. This doesn't actually reduce the number of shots to kill, so the time to kill stays the same. It remains 367 milliseconds. But the big thing about 40 damage is that if you give the weapon a 1.5x headshot multiplier by default, which I think it should have, suddenly you can get a 2-shot kill with 1 headshot and 1 body shot, making it slightly more forgiving at achieving that 2-shot kill than having to get 2 headshots, obviously, which means that theoretically it might be slightly easier and more consistent to get that 2-shot kill with the M45A1 than with the P18 or the Glock, for instance. I would also argue that for pistols specifically, having a higher damage per shot is more important than it is for the other weapons. Obviously, when it comes to primaries, your big focus is how many shots to kill against a full health opponent, but you'll very frequently be using a pistol in a situation where you've already dealt damage to a target, and you'll be switching to your pistol and attacking a target that doesn't have maximum health. So having even just slightly more damage per shot, I think can still be advantageous for a pistol. There are conceivable situations where having even just a slight increase to the amount of damage per shot could reduce the number of shots required to finish off a target. So where does that leave the revolvers with these newly balanced semi-auto pistols? Honestly, they're still really good. The revolvers are currently by far the best pistols in the game. There's really no reason not to use them. With the changes that I've made, they're still very competitive and honestly, potentially even still slightly better. But the gap in performance between the semi-auto pistols and the revolvers is narrowed enough that I think there becomes a genuine argument to be made about using one or the other. Whereas currently in the game, there's really no reason not to use one of the 2 revolvers. With these buffs that I've mentioned for the semi-auto pistols, the revolvers become a faster killing but slightly more niche weapon due to their reduced capacity and longer reload time. The semi-auto pistols, by comparison, kill a little bit slower, but have slightly more versatility because of their increased ammo capacity and faster reload time. So those are the changes I would make to, the damage, the TTK, to make the gun slightly more competitive. But what are some ideas we could do to make using pistols not only more competitive, but also just more fun? Because it's a game and it's supposed to be fun. I'd love to see them bring in the pistol quick draw mechanic from Modern Warfare 2. If you never played that game, there was an attachment for the pistols where your character would pull your primary to the side and pull out the pistol with one hand. It allowed you to pull out the pistol really fast, and it was just fucking rad. It looked so cool. It's one of those gameplay mechanics that's like, once you use it, it's like, why wasn't this the way it's been done forever? There's no reason not to do this every time going forward. This should just be the default way pistols are handled forever going forward, because it's just that good. It feels so natural. It feels so cool. It's that perfect gameplay mechanic where it feels immersive and it feels cool, but it also services the gameplay by allowing you to get your pistol out faster, which makes the pistols better. It would also be a good way for them to balance pistols versus PDWs in the secondary category. There's been leaks and rumors about them potentially adding a full auto secondary in season 2 or 3, which is just befuddling, because if they add a full auto gun into the secondary weapon slot of Battlefield 6, literally no one will ever use any of the pistols ever again. So a good way that they could balance it is that the pistols get the quick draw mechanic, but any other special weapon does not get that benefit. Allowing you to use the pistols more quickly, it becomes more of an oh shit, secondary save your life type of gun versus just having another second gun. Honestly, I don't really like the idea of them adding a full auto weapon into the secondary category, because I do feel like it's just going to become the de facto standard, especially with how bad the pistols already are in the game, but I digress. Main takeaway is just to add the pistol quick draw mechanic. It should be default on all of the pistols, revolvers included. It's so fucking cool. So, all of this talk about game balance and damage numbers and how to make things better, it begs the question, how good should the pistols be? And this is where we're going to start to talk about gameplay philosophy. Because as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to making any game, aside from simulators, there are 2 questions you should ask yourself when designing any gameplay mechanic. The first question is this gameplay mechanic fun? If the answer to that question is yes, then you don't have to ask yourself the second question. If the answer to that question is no, this mechanic is not inherently within itself fun, the second question you ask is, does this mechanic being in the game make the game as a whole more fun? That may seem a little counterintuitive, a little confusing, so let me explain. The mechanic of spread within Battlefield 6 is a fairly controversial one, and it's pretty easy to describe it as an unfun mechanic. Not being able to hit a target because the bullets are going in random directions that you have no control over isn't really fun. However, spread is pivotal to the experience of Battlefield, and the game would be significantly worse if they took spread out of the game altogether. If you want to play a game like Battlefield that has no spread, go back in time and play 2042 at launch. It plays like ass because there's no semblance of engagement distance. There's no understanding of where you're safe from certain weapon types or from certain areas of the map. You can die to anyone, from anywhere. It isn't fun. Spread is so important to making Battlefield not just play well as a game, but genuinely fun. The game would be significantly less fun without spread, even though spread in and of itself is not a fun gameplay mechanic. It is annoying to lose a gunfight because of spread, but the downside of that happening is worth the upside that spread offers the game as a whole. Circling back to the pistols, does having them be bad, because obviously that is unfun, does having them be bad make the game better? And I simply don't believe that it does. The one thing that it could arguably do is make it to where the player is ensured to be at a massive disadvantage when they run out of ammo with their primary, which controls the flow of gunfights and things like that. However, you could easily achieve the same thing by just excluding pistols from the game altogether. So if they're gonna be in the game at all, they may as well be usable. If the point of the pistols is to be weak so that the player is at a disadvantage when they're forced to use them, then you might as well not even put them in the game in the first place. That's not me advocating for them to remove pistols. That's me advocating for them to make the pistols actually good. And again, a lot of the changes I made in this video to the pistols don't even really make them that good. They're still statistically worse than all of the primaries. And yet they're significantly better than they already are in the game, which just goes to show how really shit they actually are, that you can buff them so significantly and yet they still lag behind. But again, that's just my opinion. Feel free to leave a comment in the comments letting me know what you think about the pistols. If you think I'm completely wrong about it, let me know. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.